Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt here from Divination Counseling Service to present today the full moon of November 30th. So we're looking at the last full moon that happens before the eclipses, because the next two charts will be either a total solar eclipse or a partial eclipse, which happens then at the end of December. So you have December 14th, and then I think the other one is December 29th. Now, I also want to point out that in particularly the 29th chart, we will be looking at the new age. So we're getting really, really close to that transition of zeitgeist, which I've been really talking about and preparing us for, and that takes place on December 21st. So it is right between the full moon and the new moon next month. So I'm really excited about that. But before we can talk about that, we have to talk about where we are today. So with that, we're going to be looking at a full moon chart for November 30th, 2020. I'm going to use Washington, D.C., which is as good a place as any, to look at what's going on. If you happen to live across the country, if you're somewhere in California or if you're in Canada, you might have to adjust the timing. But we're going to work with the East Coast charts and most importantly DC, because sometimes that's where all the action happens. I'm not really a political astrologer. I do a lot of writing for a political group, but I don't do it here on my channel. But nonetheless, it is still something that's very obvious when we look at newspapers, or if I'm going to go for the Aries point, it's almost always going to be a standout what's going on in the nation's capital. So before I begin this full moon, I just want to say thank you to the people who have subscribed. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the comments and the likes. I thank you for the suggestion of doing the Janus software in my last video. It turned out that I guess a few more people were interested than I thought, which is really a good thing, because the reason I'm here in part is to honor your suggestions as my audience. So thank you so much, and keep the suggestions coming. I do have at least 1 week a month where I struggle with what I should be looking at. And it's really helpful when you, the audience, make those suggestions, because I love complying. So thank you once again for being subscribers. Also, thank you to the subscribers of my newsletter and my website. Thank you very much, guys, in gratitude. Now, with that said, I want to jump to the November chart. And as always, I'm going to start off with Janus. So let's go to the chart. Now, on this chart, a couple of things are going to stand out. First of all, look at this Venus right here at the ascendant opposing Uranus in retrograde, okay? There's a beautiful opposition happening here, and they are affected by the ascendant and the descendant, because remember that we can go 10 degrees either way. So at 7 degrees, we're only 1.5 degrees. So even the tightest Uranian orbs would still be in effect here. The 4 degrees off the descendant with Venus, again, we can go 10 degrees, but 3 degrees difference between, and actually not, 2.5 degrees, no, actually 3.5, because it is almost 11 degrees here. So again, kind of tight orbs. I like to keep things that way. Other things I want to point out. This is a 12-degree Aquarian IC. It actually starts at 2 degrees Aquarius. So I want to point out that none of this third house, Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, none of them are on an angle. So the only representation at this point that we have on an angle, and I'll put everything in slowly as I normally do, is that Uranus and Venus. Now, the interesting thing about Uranus and Venus is that in an individual chart, this could be like falling in love suddenly. Okay, like boom. So I'm not going to rule that out. I think that there could be some falling in or out of love, really, or with friends. In other words, there could be some unexpected love circumstances within friendships. And that's not to say that friends are falling in love with friends. Yeah, that could be happening too. But it could also be that someone that you know or that you're very close to is involved in an unusual situation. So Venus and Uranus, because Uranus is sudden, it's freedom, it's change, it's revolution. But it also points to Venus, which is not only relationships, but also money. So there could be concern about money or sudden expenditures or sudden money. Sudden money is a good possibility because Venus, even in an opposition, is oftentimes a very benevolent energy. So really wonderful stuff right there. And it could be that, as been promised, crossing fingers, that somewhere around the end of this month, as we approach the month of December, that we will indeed hear about stimulus checks. So cross our fingers. It's a possibility with Uranus to Venus. Okay? Now, I also want to point out, before I move on, that look at this. See the sun and the south node both sitting in the second house of money, finances. The problem with the sun in the second house is, and I say this because I have a private business. I've got a number of clients, many of whom I've had many, many years. Maybe I could go like many decades. In these charts of some of these people that I've been reading for a long time, they do have sun in the second. But one of the things I like to always point out about sun in the second, it is about wanting to earn money. These people are usually very good earners. They're also extremely good spenders. Meaning that they might be the people in my clientele, some of them that I know will always earn money, but I also know they're always going to outspend it, or they're going to outspend me in any event. So there's a spending issue with the sun in the second house, okay? Especially when it's with the south node, because in the south node situation, there is a tendency to not get what one deserves, to underestimate one's value, and I do fear this because I know how desperate we are for this stimulus check, but I also know that, you know, in terms of Washington, there are a number of people that don't deal with reality. And I mean that in the sense that they're out of touch. It's very hard for someone who's been entitled and wealthy their whole life to understand what it might be like for those of us who've had to struggle for, well, in my case, years and years, decades, actually, the first part of my whole adult life. I think that, and my childhood, because of the way that I grew up. And, you know, I have, through my lifetime, run into people who are not of the same standing income-wise. They've come from much more than I have. And there is sometimes a disconnect in way a person sees things based upon how they were raised, okay? And I know for a fact that I don't always see my own wealth because to me, I come from a world where everybody struggled. So it's hard sometimes for me to fathom. Not everybody's struggling, and they can afford whatever I would choose to charge. It's just been a very big struggle for me. I think that there are going to be many of us in that position with this full moon. I think that some of us have been in this position, and it doesn't, I can tell you that with the Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturn in the third house, that there is going to be some disappointments with regards to financial matters. I can tell you that Saturn in particular is kind of a rough planet to have in the house of communication because it reminds us how very limited and very restricted we are. It's interesting because I watch on the news all these people who want everything open, open it. But what about people like me? I'm not going to go. So you think it's so important to be open, but I'm going to tell you that there's a huge part of the population that just won't break the rules. Okay, so there's that Saturn again. I think that the transformation is healing, but I think that part of healing is painful. And the acknowledgement that just because your store is open does not mean that you will have business. And I think that that is something that I do know some businesses are accepting and acknowledging, and then having to reinvent themselves, and in a lot of cases successfully reinventing themselves. So I do want to put that in there. I do feel as though the Pluto Jupiter is a healing process, but it's healing through restrictions. And it really brings to mind the fact that we are moving from an earth age, material, to an air age, not so material. And could this COVID virus, could this lineup relate, even this, okay, even this, relate to the fact that we are beginning to look outside the box when it comes to materialism, okay, and that goes for capitalism and the way that we've been running our show, so to speak. It's just interesting because I've been doing a lot of Hellenistic studies, which is studying the age changes. And the next age does not require the same things that this age does. And the irony is the new age starts in about a month, okay? I know that sounds really odd because we don't think of things changing so quickly, and I don't think it's going to change that quickly. I think any age takes somewhat of an evolutionary process. However, because it is Aquarius, that's what we're going to be dealing with for the next 20 years as part of the air regime. I think it is going to happen a little bit faster than what we have seen in the past. Sort of like how that vaccination came about in less than a year, where every other vaccination in this country has taken 10 years plus. So not so unusual if we're discussing the energy of air. So the earth energy, okay, which Uranus is going to be a part of, still in an earth sign, is, I believe, that conflict that begins with the new age, that conflict between materialism and not. My daughter, who is not a millennial, she's older, but she mentioned that millennials are not into the same things, but how ironic, because all the things that they're not into cost money and they don't have money. So think about how a whole generation is coming out not able to start their lives, not able to buy homes, not able to buy cars. They just don't have money. They're in too much debt. And how is that going to change the way they think and process and what they value? I think it's going to change in ways that we can't even comprehend right now. So, and I'm not against it nor opposed to it. So, and I think people who know me know that. I'm excited for the new age. So I am one of those looking forward to it. But I do want to point out that this energy in Venus and then also in Mercury does also intensify that energy. And remember, the chart itself is ruled by Pluto. Pluto shows up in the third house, the house of communication, which means we are transforming how we communicate. Now, are we happy about it? No. The third house is a tough house. It's Mercury is not in it. So, but there's still this disconnect between what we feel and think versus what's going on around us. Okay. There's still going to be some of that going on. Capricorn is the energy of Saturn and its structures, but it's coming to the very end of that cycle. And so it does kind of have us looking at our systems, if you will. They're also known as infrastructure in a different way, but that's what Saturn is related to. And in the earth signs, I heard an astrologer say this, and I really liked it because I think it really fits the energy. That, and I wish I remember who it was, but they talked about how Saturn is the structure of the internal, our government and the way we function internally, but that Uranus, which was once ruled by Saturn, are the external infrastructures. And I think that's why revolution is associated with this energy. It's interesting. People talk about wars. Oh, I think our war days are pretty much coming to an end. I think wars are going to be happening on computers and through technology. But I do believe that revolutions will become the order of the day. And as people become aware of this Saturn Capricorn, this is the world, this is not just the United States, that there is going to be some question about all governments, and as it should be, particularly doing a Kronos Hades configuration, which is going to be going on till the exact hit of 2030. And I think I've talked about it already. And as speaking of which, let's look at that. Let's go look at it. So let's select some extras here. We want Chiron, and then let's take our trans-Neptunians, because I do want to see what's going on. We need Vulcan. We'll leave Vulcan off. Again, I don't want to confuse people. I love working with galactic centers and black moons, but again, as an astrologer, and I really encourage everyone to do this, play, because what I'm good at in astrology, or what I really feel drawn to, might not be the subject matter you feel drawn to. Astrology is vast, vast. So there are so many areas that people can go to in astrology. So as we throw up all of these other things on there, all of a sudden we have so much more jumping out at us. We have Vulcanus rather, which is in retro, but let me tell you a little bit about it. He sits up there at the midheaven coming from the ninth, and that's pressure. There's a great deal of pressure to move into the future, and it's interesting because I think I talked about it in one of the other last two charts I did, and if you realized how much pressure is going on right now because President-elect Joe Biden cannot get his transition team up and running because it's building pressure. They're not moving on. We need to move forward into the future. We're not moving on. Now, interestingly enough, coming from that house, you also have, as I was talking about before, that Kronos Hades combination. And the ninth house is finding out information. It's also seen as philosophies, higher education, big businesses and things like that. And here we have a Kronos Hades. Now it is retrograde, but it does get one to wonder what's going on that we might be finding out about. The ninth house is opposite the third, where that Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturn are now sitting. So there isn't a direct opposition, though. I do want to point that out, that 13 and 10 do not in any way, especially because they move so slowly, they don't aspect anything here. The only opposition comes from the placement of the houses. And there are astrologers that's how they read. The same thing right here. If you think of the moon as the people, the public, the node to the public, and shared resources, again, it does look like there's an opportunity for a stimulus, okay? But at the same time, all of this, especially as you get to Poseidon right here with that Venus, is what is it that we're hearing in the media, or what is it that we're learning about finances? I know that we already are learning the amount of money that's been stolen from the CARES Act and everything else by people getting money and that apply for money that really shouldn't have it. That's again, we have such an inequity problem in this country that really needs to be addressed, and that is a system failure. Okay, that's a system failure. Why is it the people themselves are not worth more and only a select few? So there are a lot of things that will have to be looked at in this country for sure. Now, the sun in this case is trine Mars, which bodes well for self-expression and for people who want to earn money in their work. Yeah, that's not self-expression. The expression is to earn money on the job or on a regular basis. But see, I worry because here we go with the sun in the south node. It's sort of like saying, yeah, you could work, but are you earning enough money for what you're doing or the risks that you are putting out there? And this is when I go back to our minimum wage hasn't been changed in over 20 some years. I mean, things like that really need to be addressed. And it doesn't bode well for the building of the economy to build it back the way it was. So some of these things need to be adjusted. Now, as we move on, looking at, again, the media. The media here is in opposition to Uranus. And, it's also propaganda. And the thing that I worry about with Uranus is, again, the propaganda, the gaslighting, the lies, the absolute deceit, the whole coup thing. All of that is bizarre world. And in the world of Aquarius, which starts in 1 month, the idea of transparency and truth will become so very important that it's not surprising that we're having some whiplashes right now, which is one of the reasons why it gets so set up so strongly on course. Now, because we're using, and I want to use different chart forms here on the Janus program, and helping all of us to understand more what's in here, I'm going to see if I can find what I was looking for, which, here we are. So I'm looking at this chart, and I'd really like to see, I don't think this was it, no. This is the thing. I get this. Well, first of all, we can have a pop-up translation. Okay, and it talks about, of course, that this is a time of truth, seeking truth, knowledge, and wisdom, and how money matters and security, all the stuff I just talked about, and how much, no matter how discontent we are, we really need to start striving for that inner harmony and that peace. Okay, I wasn't necessarily looking for that, but I did want to talk about, I'll tell you what, let me find it. Just making sure I'm set back up on the right format here. I did find it. Let's see, right there. So under view, you would look for aspects. Took me a minute, but I found it. Again, I'm not as familiar, and I didn't want to waste our time here. But here we have it. So you have the sun in the 4th, conjuncting Mercury in the 4th with a 5-degree, 48-minute, 44-second separating aspect. So we have the 4th house sun opposing the moon, which is why it's a full moon. We have the sun trine Uranus. And that is actually one of the things I wanted to talk about too, was that what's going on right now is it lends itself to rebellion, to revolution, to change. So there's good and bad in that one. But here we have all the moon aspects to the sun, Mercury, and Uranus. And here are Mercury aspects. So again, a couple of good trines here on Mercury. But again, is that good or bad? Because Mercury can be rather unsettling and disruptive. Is the mind just going along with something that perhaps it shouldn't? couple of things to think about there. So then we go down to the squares where Venus squares Neptune, a little bit of disappointment. Very, very likely this month. It's only a separation by 21 minutes, 6 seconds. It's coming into it. Same thing with the Venus square to the ascendant. And this is, as we know, the Venus from the 4th. Wait a minute, I'm on the wrong chart here. I am so sorry. I just realized that no, we do not have. I've just worked us ahead. Oh no, I was right. I was right. No, it's so weird. Okay. Why? Nope, it is the wrong chart. There's our chart. Remember, Venus is right here with Apollon on the ascendant. So apparently when I did that, I absolutely changed. Let's go back. So we're going to view aspects. So I knew something was wrong there right when I got into there. We're still looking at a full moon. So we still have moon and sun in opposition, but it's the 2nd to the 8th house. That makes it more sense. There's our trine to the midheaven. Okay. We also still have sextiles here. Okay. Yeah, we're got a head start on our next new moon. I do apologize for that. I'm jumping ahead. But here we have it. Okay, so this is the aspects that we're looking at. And these are the squares. So you have the Uranus and Venus squaring the future. You know, how are we going to do this? That kind of thing happening. Trining the Sun and Mars. Trining the 10th. So again, working in tangent here. But always when I look at trines, I'm not always, it's easy, but I'm not always sure it's the best. So just a little bit of a warning there. Yes, this makes much more sense. Here we go. So we have the 2nd house, Sun. We have, and just make sure we do have a 2nd house Sun. We did talk about it. So viewing aspects. So there, again, you get a really good idea, but you got to be careful of these charts switching up on you. But you get a really good idea of how we can work within the Janus program. I am actually going to switch programs at this point. I'm going to actually pull up Solar Fire because of the ability to see my asteroids. I wanted to check them out. Before I do, I also wanted to pull up that Solar Fire also has a way to read the aspects of what's going on. They do not, in this case, give you the house as they did in the Janus program, but they give you a wide array of different things that you could look up from there. Now, I wanted to point this out. I never did get this far. Pluto is parallel the Sun. Okay, I know that's not something you're going to be able to readily see in that chart. It acts like a conjunction, which then means that there can be a lot of intense days. Pluto's a very intense planet. The other thing I want to remind people about Pluto is that it can pull the rug out from under you because Pluto is a how do I put it? You have no control with Pluto. That's what I want to say. There's no, Pluto has its own control over you. So that's really important. There's not a lot of aspects to Pluto, but it does aspect the Sun. Here is the Sun as an inconjunct to the Uranus that's going on right now. But here's what I was looking at, the opposition of Uranus to Venus. So everything's in there as well. I did make sure that I have the right chart. Goodness knows, I work ahead too much. So let's look at the angles of this chart quickly. Okay, I know I'm running into some time here. First of all, we looked at this 12 degree. There wasn't much here. Remember, this Saturn is not here. But now that you've thrown in a couple of asteroids, we're looking at an abundantia, okay, abundance. And then it talks about faces. And it's about withdrawals or endings, and a bunch of endings. Well, there's been a lot of problems because of the economy. So there have been a bunch of endings. And the interesting thing is withdrawal or endings also appears with Apollonia, which is businesses, which directly squares that IC with Abundia and Cupido there. So there's a huge amount going on in the ascendant. I'm going to kind of wait to get there. There's just so much going on. Opposing our Abundia and our Cupido, we also have, we talked about Vulcanus and the pressure, but see up here, endings and withdrawing. So withdrawing for things, maybe because of a health concern, and this could be anything from people who can't go to work for 2 weeks because they have a positive COVID test, right down to possible shutdowns. And I do know that certain areas, and I talked about this before, are shutting down. It's interesting because I can watch this stuff come in on several charts. That's one of the reasons why I do jump ahead. I didn't want to jump ahead on that December 29th chart, but we'll talk about that in a few weeks. The descendant, where there's a lot of retrogrades, shows a few things. First of all, it shows there's a lot of pain and need to help other people. So it's either helping people who are not well. And believe me when I tell you, there's a lot of pain if you worked in healthcare, because what those people are having to deal with is crazy. That's why people who are really selfishly wanting everything to be open are not thinking about, the people that have died, the families that are brokenhearted, those that are sick, or the fact that the healthcare workers have to work under these conditions. So not fair. So not fair. So, people say, well, they have their rights. Well, don't we have a right to our lives? I'm just saying. So I just get a little bit upset with that. This kind of puts a little emphasis on that. It talks also about how unpredictable people will be, how unpredictable partners will be. This here is, like I said, the pain of helping, the having to help people who are in pain. And then this awareness at 0 degrees, 8 minutes of Taurus. Academia is learning, whether it be in a book. So we could be talking about schools and children and how they too are shutting down. Also at this time, November 30th, we're also looking at when schools actually really close, which would be like 3 weeks from that point. So there's a couple of things going on that will come up in that time period. So the retrograde also could be pointing to the fact that the fact is that kids withdraw from school every year in December. It always happens, but I think there's something this year that's a little different. The ascendant, which is by far the single most active asteroid element point in this chart. So we go back to Venus, which was one of the only one of the only planets actually that aspected in this chart. So I wanted to look at a couple of things. First of all, this chart starts with Eros. Eros is what excites us, but it's also heart conditions. And it's also, it's not Eros, it's Valentine. Same thing though, it's also the blood. It's what excites you, Valentine. Think about a form of love. But we, in medical astrology, would also, that's a heart. The Diana, it's not Diana actually, it's Artemis, but the Hunter asteroid right here with Nike is a reminder that, when people are hunting for something or they're doing something, and look at this. This is to Vesta, your goals. If you've got a goal, you just do it. Okay, but here's the problem. Just doing it, and then I see withdrawals and not knowing if it's right to speak out about a business or businesses, and how people feel capped, like they're being held against their will, so to speak, like you've been kidnapped or something. But the blame is the way that businesses are run or being handled. Nemesis, Apollonia, or also the fact that there's just so many people. So, sometimes I think that people don't think about that. that we're in an already overpopulated situation, that our options on solving problems are fewer than we might think. They're not as optional as we can think they are because there are too many. Okay? And you can't do for one and not do for all. So that becomes an issue. The other thing is this idea of Bacchus victory. So I take that to be the vaccinations, the victory of the drug, because that's what Bacchus is. But that drug isn't here yet. So I'm still, and you're hearing a lot about it. There's your media, but there's still withdrawal on two angles, which means that we still may have to shut down for a time, a little while. Somebody said they don't see it being more than a few days. I think it will be a few weeks, personally, but I could be wrong. So we'll see. And I don't know that it'll be a shutdown like it was before, so I'm not quite sure. I just feel when I look at these charts and you see withdrawing on two angles, and on this angle you see here, I'm sorry, here's your withdrawing, okay? So I lie. This is being on your own. Withdrawing to be on your own, that's quarantine, okay? But I also look at that as a way, a form of withdrawal. And the Zeus here is being aspected by here we go again. It's complicated because of beginnings. Beginnings have complicated things. Now, this is all stuff coming from the 12th, so it's not on an angle, okay? But it might be something that's causing some excitement because that's what Zeus is, okay? The other thing that I wanted to go through is the idea that here we go, just do it, and again, the victory, but it also comes with blame. So there's a lot of blame going around, and maybe too many, too much. I think that was the last asteroid that I wanted to look at. So I'm going to change this to a dial. Okay. So of course, I wanted to look at the Aries point only briefly. I didn't see a whole lot here. We have an ascendant midheaven at the Aries point, which in a natal chart would be a calling or something that would be in the outer world that the person would feel very connected to. The Aries point does feature, by the way, I don't have there's a limited amount of asteroids on this chart. Okay, that's what all this is. I work with a lot more. And if I even can say this right, Thucydides, Thucydides, for an astrologer is pandemics. And ironically, it's right at the Aries point. The good news is that so is drugs and victory. So I want to point that out. I just thought it was really cool stuff. And it's really, it's going to show up in all charts right now because it is the Aries point. It's down at 15 fixed. I believe it's 15 Aquarius by early December. So it's really right there. Beautiful. This is November 30th. So this Aries point here will go to, let's see, 22. Let's see, 2230 should be right. Well, 36. Let's go back to 30. Okay. Again, we're dealing with a Mars-Saturn, and unfortunately, when I think of Mars-Saturn and then Mercury's ended, there's a Zeus, Pluto. I think that there's a lot of excitement about transformation, but at the same time, there's a lot of heartbreak. Mars-Saturn, and again, it's pointing to the fact that a lot of people are still dying, and that is a sad thing. We're still hearing a lot. So here we are. We're on the precipice of things happening. And unfortunately, it's a health matter. Unfortunately, people are still going to be dying by the 2230. Now, you could also take 2230 is the same as 730 mutable, okay? So there we are. So if you can see, they're right across the dial from one another. There it is, there and there, okay? So there's a lot of pressure on authority figures. Oh, I truly believe that. I think if you're a leader of any kind right now, you really have to step up and do your job. This is a tough time for everybody due to a health concern. So I wanted to show that because I thought that was really important. Also because I didn't talk about Thucydides, if I'm saying it correctly. Now here's our sun and moon, and remember they are in opposition. But I really like this. This is so beautiful for, you know. I'm a huge lover of Chiron, and Chiron is a pioneer. It's pioneering spirit. It's the alternatives. It's you think about who Chiron was in astrology. He was an alternative healer, so a teacher of sorts. So here, what's so interesting is here we have the sun, the moon, which has a Chiron midheaven. Look how close it is to Pluto. My goodness gracious. Okay, so equaling Jupiter, Pluto. You see that? I think that's really, and I believe it is Jupiter, Pluto. I could be wrong, but let me see. Yeah, it's Pluto. And no, Jupiter's here, so it's not. It is Pluto though. But look at how everything's changing. The people are changing. Okay? Transformation, not just simple change, not Uranus change, sudden change. This is transformational change over a period of time. Things are really changing. Our relationships are changing. How we see one another is changing. How we look at the pandemic is changing. How we or what we value, credibility. A lot of things are changing. It's not just about the sun being in the second house where we are looking at the change within ourselves of what we value. What's more important? You know, you always think money's really important until you lose a loved one. What is really important? I mean, we really need to think about that. So that is, and then Pluto brings in again the chaos of the disease right there is too. Neptune. So it really is an interesting time we're living in right now. There we go. So one of the things that I wanted to do, because that's at, I'm going to, roughly 8:30, so like 1 degree off of, or 1 degree over, we would only have to go 1 degree to find the rest of the axis. So here we have the Pluto moon, so we know that we're on the axis right here. Look how close, I believe that is, oh, that's our health asteroid again. It's just amazing how you're looking at the same things repeat over and over again in the themes. Let me get to Pluto, because we know that Pluto is also part, yeah, it's also part of the, see that 1 degree off. So if you're because 2230, okay, would be, there you are, 2230 would be the Aries point. So we're 1 degree off of that Aries point. I'm going to bet that the sun and the moon are really strongly going to be in effect in the Aries point because they're in that 1 degree mark from the Aries point. So let me come back to you. And before I say goodbye, and I just want to reiterate again that these charts are forming a pattern, if you will, and we're starting to see some things happening over and over again. And it is talking about our healing. Prediction-wise, when I say that the sun and the moon might be falling in the Aries point, there's a couple things to look for. Relationships that occur out in the world, or how we're reacting to people who are not in our own households. The other thing to look out for is the transition of the general population. Okay, how people might be changing. I'm not going to say that, you know, when we get to particularly the new age, there are a lot of us that are really looking forward to that. And I'm imagining that most people who watch anything of my channels are in that category, where we know change is coming and we're excited for it and we're ready for it. And many of us might be young people who probably know better how to live in it already than some people who are older. But one of the things that happens when an age first happens, when an age change happens, is that people who are resistant to the new age or to that new direction will rebel, if you will. So we are going to see these strange protests, not to wear masks or not to follow health instructions, which I think is, really ridiculous. We can't be such a free country that it's okay to kill everybody. I mean, again, people are just not valuing. They have to look at their value system. And I think that as this year progresses, we're going to be talking a lot about this country's Pluto return. I know I'll be doing something on that. I'm not a political person, so I don't want to look at this as politics. I really want to look at this as age defining, age changing, because it's very subtle to see an age change in the beginning versus looking back over an age change. 2020 is always hindsight. Anyway, with that said, this has been a rather long video for me. So again, I apologize for that 1 moment lapse in there, the wrong full moon. You'll be talking about that one with me in about another month. But anyway, until we meet again, thank you for allowing me into your life, and happy readings to you all.